Listen, I have been stationed at the Galactic Defense Academy for 37 standard cycles, and I thought I had seen everything. Really, I did. The Zephyrians, with their ridiculous tentacle coordination exercises that look more like interpretive dancing gone wrong. The Ketran cadets, who insist on bringing their ceremonial battle hammers to navigation class, even the Vorlak younglings who somehow manage to set fire to water during basic chemistry lessons. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened during assessment day 4471. My name is Instructor Vex Moranis, and before you ask, yes, I chose this assignment. Military intelligence said teaching would be a peaceful transition into my twilight years. Military intelligence, as usual, was spectacularly wrong. The morning started normally enough. 347 cadets from 86 different species lined up in the main courtyard, all trying their best to look intimidating while secretly hoping they would not soil themselves when the apex predator arrived. The Academy's screening process is legendary across the galaxy, but it is the final assessment that separates the wheat from the cosmic chaff, so to speak. Every year, we bring in a genuine apex predator from the restricted zones, not some domesticated creature or a holographic simulation that makes cadets feel better about themselves. No, we import the real deal, the kind of beast that makes entire star systems reroute their shipping lanes. This year's specimen was a Thanok Prime Alpha. Picture, if you will, something that looks like a cross between a Terran shark, a Corellian death spider, and your worst nightmare after eating too much fermented Altarian cheese. Standing 12 feet tall on 6 razor-sharp legs, with skin that shifts between pitch black and deep purple depending on its mood, and teeth that could slice through battleship hull plating. Oh, and did I mention the psychic abilities? Because, apparently, regular physical terror was not enough for evolution on Thanok Prime. These monsters can read your deepest fears, project them back at you, and then feed on the resulting panic. Delightful creatures, really. Perfect for birthday parties and family gatherings. The cadets were arranged by species, as per protocol. The Zentarian delegation stood in perfect formation, their crystalline exoskeletons catching the morning light like living prisms. Show-offs, every last one of them. Next to them, the Morgani cadets practiced their synchronized breathing techniques, because apparently, matching respiratory patterns is crucial when facing cosmic horrors. The Krell contingent had formed a defensive circle, which would have been impressive if they were not all vibrating with poorly concealed terror. Behind them, a group of Silani cadets were quietly placing bets on who would faint first. Smart money was on Cadet Jorth, a particularly nervous Blingonian whose skin had already turned 3 different shades of anxiety green. And then, there were the humans. 5 of them, standing slightly apart from the main groups, not because they were antisocial, but because every other species in the galaxy has learned to give human cadets a wide berth during combat assessments. Something about unpredictable tactics and an alarming tendency to survive situations that should have been mathematically impossible. The tallest human was a female named Tara Banks, built like she could arm wrestle a construction mech and win. Next to her stood Marcus Webb, whose calm demeanor fooled absolutely no one who had seen his psychological evaluation files. Then there was Elena Vasquez, small in stature, but with eyes that suggested she was mentally calculating 17 different ways to turn any nearby object into a weapon. The 4th human, Devon Cross, was leaning casually against a wall, apparently more interested in the architectural details of the courtyard than the impending arrival of a creature that could liquefy his internal organs with a thought. And finally, there was Jake Turner, who was actually smiling. Smiling, as if facing an apex predator was some kind of amusing diversion rather than a life-threatening evaluation. The transport arrived at exactly 0900 hours, because the Academy runs on schedule even when delivering cosmic nightmares. The containment unit was impressive, a hexagonal construct of reinforced trilithium, with psionic dampening fields humming at frequencies that made my inner ears itch. As the transport crew began the release sequence, I noticed something interesting. Every single non-human cadet had unconsciously taken a step backward. Some of the more nervous ones had taken several steps backward. A few Blingonians were already eyeing the emergency exits with undisguised longing. The humans? They moved forward. Not dramatically, not with any obvious bravado, just a subtle shift in position that put them closer to the containment unit rather than farther away. It was such a small thing that most observers missed it entirely, but I have been watching predator-prey dynamics for long enough to recognize the significance. The Thanok Prime Alpha emerged from its containment like smoke given form and malevolent intent. 12 feet of living shadow and hunger, with eyes like dying stars and a presence that seemed to suck the warmth out of the air. The psychic pressure hit us immediately, a wave of primal terror that spoke to the deep brain, the part that remembers when our ancestors huddled around fires and feared the darkness beyond the light. Across the courtyard, cadets began to show the effects. Some froze completely, their bodies locked in place by instinctive fear responses. Others started backing away, slow and steady, trying not to attract attention while putting distance between themselves and the creature. A few of the younger ones were quietly whimpering, and Cadet Jorth, right on schedule, toppled over in a dead faint. The Thanok Prime Alpha began its assessment, moving through the groups with predatory grace. This was the test, you see. Not combat, not strategy, but something far more fundamental. The creature would examine each cadet, reading their fear, their determination, their potential, and then, based on some criteria known only to itself and the Academy's founders, it would choose one. The chosen cadet would be marked, not for death, but for greatness. Every legendary warrior, every famous admiral, every hero whose name echoes across the stars, they all bore the mark of an apex predator. It was recognition at the deepest level, acknowledgement from one apex predator to another that here, in this frightened young being, lay the potential for true greatness. Of course, the selection process was absolutely terrifying to watch. The creature moved through the Zentorian ranks first, its massive head swinging back and forth as it analyzed each cadet. I could see the psychic tendrils, invisible to most eyes but clear as day to anyone with military-grade neural implants, reaching out and touching minds. Several Zentorians tried to project confidence and strength, their training kicking in despite their fear. The creature paused at a few, considering, but moved on without marking any of them. The Morgani section was next. These cadets had better mental discipline, their unified breathing actually helping to create a small buffer against the creature's psychic presence. But again, after careful consideration, the Thanok Prime Alpha continued its hunt. Through the Krell, through the Silani, through groups of species I could not even pronounce properly, the creature moved with methodical precision. Each time it paused, every cadet in the vicinity held their breath, torn between hoping to be chosen and desperately wanting to be passed by. And then it reached the human section. The first thing that happened was absolutely nothing. The creature stopped in front of the 5 humans, and they stood there looking at it with expressions ranging from polite interest to barely contained fascination. No one fainted, no one backed away, no one even seemed particularly stressed. Tara Banks actually nodded to the creature, as if she were greeting a colleague in the corridor. Marcus Webb tilted his head slightly, studying the Thanok Prime Alpha with the same intensity it was using to study him. Elena Vasquez had her hands clasped behind her back in a relaxed parade rest, apparently waiting patiently for the creature to finish whatever it was doing. Devon Cross looked mildly impressed, like someone had just shown him a particularly well-crafted piece of artwork. And Jake Turner was still smiling that same infuriating smile, as if the whole situation was exactly as entertaining as he had hoped it would be. The creature seemed genuinely puzzled. Its psychic probes were meeting something they had never encountered before. Not resistance exactly, but a kind of psychological architecture that did not match any known pattern. Human minds, it turns out, are built differently than anything else in the galaxy. Where most sapient species have developed linear thinking patterns optimized for efficiency and survival, humans have something that can only be described as controlled chaos. Their thoughts bounce around like pinballs in a gravity storm, making connections that no sane evolutionary process should have allowed. They can hold contradictory ideas simultaneously, plan for multiple impossible scenarios at once, and somehow find humor in situations that should induce complete mental breakdown. The Thanok Prime Alpha spent nearly 10 minutes just standing there, trying to process what it was encountering. I could see the confusion in its posture, the way it kept tilting its massive head as if trying to get a better angle on something that refused to make sense. Finally, it made its choice. But instead of marking one of the humans with the traditional psychic brand that would identify them as chosen, the creature did something unprecedented in the history of the Academy. It approached Jake Turner directly, lowered its enormous head, and opened its jaws to reveal rows of teeth like obsidian daggers. Then, it waited. Every being in the courtyard held their breath. This was not part of the normal assessment protocol. Apex predators chose their subjects, marked them, and departed. They did not interact directly with cadets, especially not in ways that involved displaying their primary weapons at close range. Jake Turner looked down at the offered fangs, then back up at the creature's burning eyes. His smile widened slightly. "Well," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent courtyard, "that's interesting." And then, to the absolute horror of every instructor present and the complete bewilderment of every cadet watching, Jake Turner reached out and gently touched one of the Thanok Prime Alpha's fangs. The creature's reaction was immediate and completely unexpected. Instead of tearing the foolish human into component molecules, it made a sound, a deep, rumbling noise that started in its chest and built until it filled the entire courtyard. It was purring. A 12-foot-tall psychic death machine, capable of reading fears and feeding on terror, was purring like a satisfied house cat. The sound continued for nearly 30 seconds before the creature pulled back, regarded Jake Turner with what could only be described as approval, and then proceeded to do something that would be talked about in Academy circles for generations to come. It marked not just Jake Turner, but all 5 humans. Not with the traditional single mark, but with the apex recognition, a symbol that had not been seen for over 2,000 years. The last being to receive such recognition had gone on to unite 3 spiral arms under a single banner and push back an invasion from the void between galaxies. As the marking completed, and the creature prepared to depart, I realized something that should have been obvious from the start. We had been thinking about this all wrong. The apex predator had not chosen the humans because they were dangerous or fearless or exceptionally skilled. It had chosen them because it recognized something in them that we had all missed. They were not prey pretending to be predators. They were predators pretending to be prey. And as Jake Turner turned to look directly at me across the courtyard, his smile holding just a hint of something that made my survival instincts wake up and start paying very close attention, I began to suspect that humanity's reputation for being unpredictable was a vast understatement. The assessment was over, but something told me the real education was just beginning. 3 days passed before I got my answers, and trust me, those were 3 very uncomfortable days. The Academy brass was in complete meltdown mode. Emergency meetings, classified communications with high command, and enough bureaucratic panic to power a small space station. Apparently, having 5 humans simultaneously receive the apex recognition was not something their crisis management protocols had prepared for. Meanwhile, the humans themselves seemed completely unbothered by the historical significance of what had happened. Turner was attending his regular classes, participating in combat simulations, and generally acting like touching a psychic death machine's fangs was just another Tuesday for him. The others followed suit, though I noticed they had started gravitating toward each other during free periods. That should have been my first warning. On the fourth day, Director Kalth summoned me to his office. For those unfamiliar with Vorthak physiology, imagine a cross between a giant mantis and a very displeased accountant. Kalth had been running the academy for over 60 years, and his compound eyes missed nothing, absolutely nothing. Instructor Moranis, he clicked, his mandibles creating that particular sound that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. We need to discuss the human situation. What situation would that be, sir? I asked, though we both knew exactly what situation he meant. The situation where 5 cadets from a species we barely understand have been marked by an apex predator in a way that has not occurred for 2 millennia, he replied, pulling up a holographic display that made my antennae twitch with anxiety. High Command is asking questions I cannot answer. The display showed psychological profiles, combat assessments, and enough classified data to make my security clearance feel inadequate. But what caught my attention was a small notation at the bottom of each human's file. A notation that had not been there 4 days ago. Simulation results? I queried, leaning forward to get a better look. We ran them through the Corvani labyrinth yesterday, Kalth explained, his tone suggesting this had not gone as expected. Standard psychological warfare assessment. The maze adapts to exploit individual weaknesses, creating personalized nightmare scenarios designed to break mental conditioning. I knew the labyrinth. Every instructor did. It was our final test for advanced tactical students, a holographic environment that could simulate any conceivable combat situation while simultaneously attacking the subject's psychological stability. The average completion time was 4 hours. Most cadets needed therapy afterward. How did they do? I asked, though something in Kalth's expression told me I was not going to like the answer. They completed it in 37 minutes, he said flatly. All 5 of them, working as a team. I stared at the data, trying to process what I was seeing. That's impossible. The labyrinth does not allow team configurations. It is specifically designed to isolate subjects and exploit individual psychological vulnerabilities. Apparently, Kalth clicked, no one informed the humans of that limitation. He activated another display, showing surveillance footage from the labyrinth. I watched in growing amazement as the 5 humans moved through scenarios that should have left them catatonic with terror, and instead, they were treating the whole thing like some kind of elaborate game. When the maze projected Jake Turner's worst fear, a scenario involving the slow death of everyone he cared about, he studied it for approximately 30 seconds before turning to Elena Vasquez and saying, "Hey, this reminds me of that strategy puzzle from basic tactics class. What do you think?" When Tara Banks faced a simulation of her homeworld burning, she analyzed the tactical situation and started issuing orders to the others as if they were all part of some cooperative exercise. When Marcus Webb encountered a psychological attack designed to convince him he was going insane, he spent 5 minutes having what appeared to be a philosophical discussion with his own hallucinations before concluding they were not real and moving on. Devon Cross treated his nightmare scenario like an interesting engineering problem, while Elena Vasquez approached hers with the same methodical precision she used for weapon maintenance. But the most disturbing part was how they integrated their responses. Instead of 5 individuals struggling with personal demons, they had somehow turned the labyrinth into a collaborative problem-solving exercise. They shared information, covered each other's weaknesses, and approached each challenge as a group rather than as isolated subjects. "Sir," I said slowly, "this suggests their psychological architecture is fundamentally different from anything we have encountered before." "It suggests," Kalth replied grimly, "that we have been categorizing them incorrectly from the beginning." Before I could ask what he meant, an alarm started blaring throughout the Grat Academy. Not a drill alarm, not a scheduled exercise warning, but the deep, bone-rattling tone that meant we had a genuine emergency. Calth's communication unit activated immediately. "Director, we have a situation in Training Bay 7, came the voice of Lieutenant Commander Prex, the Academy's head of security. "The human cadets have requested a combat assessment against multiple opponents." "How many opponents?" "How many opponents?" Calth asked, though his mandibles were already clicking in a pattern I recognized as extreme concern. "They have asked to face a full Corvaxi assault squad, sir. 12 trained warriors, full combat gear, lethal force authorized." Calth and I exchanged looks. A Corvaxi assault squad was not a training exercise. It was a military unit capable of taking down fortified positions. They were 8-foot-tall bipedal lizards with natural armor plating, enhanced reflexes, and a cultural obsession with honorable combat. Facing 12 of them simultaneously was not an assessment, it was suicide. "Absolutely not." Calth clicked immediately. "Cancel the request. Inform the humans that such an assessment is beyond Academy parameters." "Sir," Prex replied, with the tone of someone delivering very bad news. "They have cited Regulation 847C. As recipients of the Apex recognition, they have the right to request any assessment they believe necessary to demonstrate their capabilities." I felt my stomach drop. Regulation 847C was an ancient rule, written back when the Academy was first established. It had never been invoked, because no one had received the Apex recognition in living memory. "How long until they are scheduled to begin?" Calth asked, already moving toward the door. 15 minutes, sir." I muttered, following Calth as we headed toward Training Bay 7. Because reviewing tactical data is exactly what normal cadets do before committing elaborate suicide. When we arrived, half the Academy was already there. Word had spread with the speed that only truly spectacular disasters can achieve. Instructors, cadets, and even some civilian staff had gathered in the observation galleries, all eager to witness either the greatest upset in Academy history or the messiest failure. The Corvaxi assault squad was already in position, 12 warriors arranged in perfect formation. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Thrak Ironscale, looked like he could bench press a shuttlecraft. The others were equally impressive, their natural armor gleaming under the training bay lights, weapons held with the casual competence of beings who had spent their entire lives perfecting the art of violence. And then there were the humans. 5 young beings, who collectively weighed less than any 2 Corvaxi warriors, standing in the center of the training bay, like they were waiting for a lecture to begin, rather than preparing for combat that could very well kill them all. "This is madness," whispered Instructor Zelith, a Morgani who taught advanced combat theory. "They cannot possibly believe they can win." "Look at them," I replied, studying the humans more carefully. "Do they look worried to you?" They did not. Jake Turner was stretching casually, like an athlete preparing for a routine exercise. Tara Banks was checking her equipment with the same methodical precision she used for everything else. Marcus Webb appeared to be meditating, though his eyes remained open and alert. Devon Cross was examining the training bay layout with obvious interest, while Elena Vasquez was doing something with her gear that I could not quite identify from our observation position. The countdown began. 10 seconds until combat initiation. "Should we stop this?" asked Director Calth, though we both knew it was too late for that. "I do not think we could if we tried," I replied, remembering the way Jake Turner had smiled after touching the Thanok. Prime Alpha's Fangs. 5 seconds. The Corvaxi warriors shifted into combat stances, muscles tensing for the initial assault. 3 seconds. The humans moved into what looked like a casual conversation circle. 1 second. "Begin assessment," announced the automated system. What happened next will be studied in military academies across the galaxy for the next 1,000 years. The Corvaxi charged, 12 warriors moving with coordinated precision, weapons raised, battle cries echoing through the training bay. It was a sight that should have struck terror into the hearts of anyone facing them. Instead, the humans smiled. Not Jake Turner's mysterious smile from before, but a shared expression of anticipation, like children who had just been told they could play their favorite game. Tara Banks moved first, not attacking, but positioning herself to intercept the lead warriors, while calling out what sounded like numbers to her teammates. Pattern 7. Adjustments for height differential. Marcus take point 3 through 5. Marcus Webb flowed into motion with a grace that made my combat instructor instincts sit up and pay attention. He did not try to match the Korvaxi warriors' strength or reach. Instead, he used their momentum against them, redirecting attacks and creating openings that should not have existed. Elena Vasquez had produced something from her gear that made several instructors gasp in recognition. Combat stimulants, military grade, the kind that enhance reaction time and sensory perception, at the cost of severe physiological stress. She had somehow acquired enough for her entire team. Devon Cross was not fighting in any conventional sense. He was moving through the combat zone like he was solving a three-dimensional puzzle, always exactly where he needed to be to disrupt the Korvaxi formation without directly engaging any of them. And Jake Turner was doing something that made absolutely no sense, until I realized what I was seeing. He was talking to the Korvaxi warriors. Not trash talk, not psychological warfare, but actual conversation, in their own language, while fighting them. Impressive formation, he said to Thrak Ironscale, while dodging a strike that should have removed his head. But you are telegraphing your secondary attacks. Your left shoulder drops approximately 0.7 seconds before you commit. Thrak Ironscale, to his credit, adjusted his technique mid-combat. It did not help. The humans were not just fighting as individuals who happened to be working together. They were functioning as a single organism with 5 bodies, each one perfectly coordinated with the others, sharing information and adjusting tactics in real time. When Tara Banks found herself overwhelmed by 3 warriors simultaneously, Marcus Webb was already moving to provide support, while Devon Cross created a distraction that pulled one of her opponents out of position. When Elena Vasquez needed an opening to use her enhanced reflexes, Jake Turner provided exactly the right conversation to make her target pause at precisely the right moment. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was completely impossible according to everything we knew about combat psychology and tactical coordination. And it was working. One by one, the Korvaxi warriors found themselves outmaneuvered, overwhelmed, and ultimately defeated. Not through superior strength or advanced technology, but through a level of teamwork that redefined what cooperation could look like. When the last warrior fell, the humans stood in the center of the training bay, barely breathing hard, looking around as if surprised that the exercise was over. "Well," Jake Turner said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence, "that was educational." Thrak Ironscale, pulling himself upright despite what had to be several bruised ribs, stared at the humans with an expression of profound respect. "You fight like the ancient war packs," he said slowly. "Many minds. One purpose. I have not seen such coordination since the Battle of Korvax 7. We just talked it through beforehand," Tara Banks replied with a shrug. "Figured out what everyone was good at, made some plans, adapted when things changed. Standard stuff. Standard stuff. A combat performance that had just redefined the Academy's understanding of tactical coordination, and they were calling it standard stuff." Director Kalth activated the communication system. Assessment concluded. All participants report to medical for evaluation. As the humans filed out of the training bay, chatting among themselves about the fight, like it had been nothing more than a particularly interesting class exercise, I realized something that should have been obvious from the moment the Thanok Prime Alpha had marked them. We had been asking the wrong question. The question was not why the apex predator had chosen 5 humans. The question was why it had only chosen 5. Because if this was what 5 randomly selected human cadets could accomplish with minimal training and standard academy equipment, what could their species achieve when they really put their minds to it? The thought kept me awake for the next several nights, staring at the ceiling and wondering if the galaxy was ready for humanity to discover just how dangerous they could be when they stopped pretending to be something they were not. Somewhere in the distance, I could swear I heard the sound of a Thanok Prime Alpha purring.